Today I want to talk about the regret of starting too late in life. Not on small things, but on the big things. This is not like you're starting late on a small project. It's you're starting late on life itself. And that can feel embarrassing and shameful. And this is not like you're behind on some task. This is like you're behind on a decade or two with family, with career, with your purpose, with your health, with your savings, with your retirement, with your job, with your self-development, with your life skills. You're behind. You're way behind. And these are things that almost had a window that closed, where the opportunity to learn these things, it feels like it's almost too little too late at this point. And that window feels gone. And now you're forced to process what it means to begin what you were aiming for. It feels no longer structurally possible to have the kind of life you thought you might have. And the worst part is that it's all on you. And you've got, you actually probably don't feel that way. You actually probably have a bunch of people that you can point to say it's really their fault. And whether it is or not really is not anything I want to talk about today. It's really about the fact that it still lands on you. It lands on you. It's your job to deal with this regret and the facts of this delayed life. And today I talk about mindset a lot, but today I don't want to talk about mindset. This is about the loss, the grief of a particular kind of future, and what it means to live after that loss without delusion and without collapse and without turning your grief into a performance and without getting stuck in despair and without turning to addiction, and also without turning to delusional optimism. What's the middle ground? What's the middle ground? So, what's the real problem? That's the first thing we have to understand. If you are in a place in your life where you're filled with regret and you are realizing that there are certain things in your life you should have started doing, certain habits you should have had a decade ago. So now, we're looking back at about, you're about, like 3,650 days delayed or so, right? You got about 3,000 days of delay. You're about 3,000 days behind on where you should be. That's very hard to sprint your way to catch up to that. It's very hard to brute force your way to overcome that kind of delay, to overcome that level of being late to life. So when people say things, and people will maybe try to encourage you, they'll say things like, it's never too late. Never too late. They're not talking about what you're facing. It's you part of reckoning with this is realizing that it's too late for some things. When people say it's never too late, they're talking about starting over when the timeline still allows for repair. That just doesn't feel like your situation, right? And you're not trying to win back time. You're not trying to make sense of what your life becomes now that, you're not trying to reframe this to realize that you could still make it, right? That's maybe a different video and a different concept where we say, hey man, it's still possible. Gary V, you're Gary V, you're 82 years old. You're still a baby. Those are great. That's a great concept. I like it. I think it's useful. I think it's encouraging. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about facing the facts that you are filled with regret and facing up to that regret. Practicing acceptance. This is we're applying grief strategies to life design. Right? You're not trying to win back time. You're trying to make sense of what your life becomes now, that the long arc of hope you were operating on has broken. That dream, that concept of your life is no longer feasible. And you have to accept that, and you have to come to terms with that. This thread that you took for granted that was part of your identity, that projected who you could be and all the possibilities that were contained in that, it's just gone. And it's gone suddenly, not because something changed suddenly, but because it dawned on you suddenly. That's tough. That's tough. Where you say, oh, something happened in my life that caused me to realize, no, I just had a moment, just a small moment where I realized, oh my God, this is really bad. Right? If you've been there, that's what this video is about. There was a moment in my life where I had that. I've 100% been through this. I think a lot of people have. It's just the degree of realization that they've had. It's how hard this realization hit them emotionally that can fluctuate. But you look at other people in life that maybe didn't have to learn things the hard way, and you think, man, that would have been real nice. If only somebody had helped me. Only somebody had just pointed me in the right direction. If only I had, and then you go down this whole path. It's the self-pity, and I'm the victim. And listen, did that. I fully did that for a long time. For years, every day I woke up and I thought of all the people could have done better by me. They could have done way better by me, and I deserved way better than to have those people in my life. And if only this, and if only that. And man, do you know what that achieved? I'm sure you could guess. It achieved nothing. And in fact, actually, that's not true. It did achieve something. It achieved my stagnation. It achieved me being stuck. It achieved further delay. That achieved further delay. It did. So, what are some of these things? But I get it, because it's really hard to face that instinct to say, if only people had done this, if only I had been helped, if only, listen, you're naming real things. I'm not saying those are illegitimate, right? Because what are some of the things that you're grieving when you realize that you've got too late of a start in life to really make something happen for yourself that you've always maybe dreamed of or wanted or hoped, right? And you realize it's kind of on you, meaning it's landing on you. Why is that so hard? Because these things are meaningful, because these things are huge, because letting them go feels like settling for a life that is just too far below what we had expected. And we do not want to give it up. It's the problem is that we need to accept where we are, but we cannot accept it. Right? For example, you wanted a family and you kept delaying that family. Now you're not sure it's possible. That's a tough one to swallow. Maybe you thought you'd be financially stable by now, but you're starting from zero. Maybe you even did the right things and made the right decisions and were financially stable and were on a right path. Then something happened. So, listen, it happens to a lot of people all the time. They get divorced, things get crazy, lawyers get involved. They got to sell the house, they got to sell this, they got to drain the kids' college fund. Life starts over again. In your late 30s. It's rough. Happens to a lot of that specific situation happens to a lot of people in their late 30s, early 40s. What's another situation? You believed that your purpose would emerge organically, but no clear path really ever emerged. You thought you would be further on in your career by now, save more money by now, have more skills by now, have better friends by now. You assumed your body would bounce back. Now it doesn't. And you feel that just clawing, slow entropy of death pulling you into the future. And it's like that scene from Toy Story 4 where they're just like sliding into the incinerator, like pushing their legs. They're like, no. Like life used to feel like this rocket into the future, and now it feels like, don't put me into the incinerator. Right? This feels like this inevitable pull of death, and life turns from a comedy into a horror movie. That's what it can feel like. It's that flip. And the grief that you have is not just that these things didn't happen. It's that you know why they didn't happen. Oh, and that is the worst part. It's not the worst part, but sometimes it feels like the worst part. You were there for it. You made the trade-offs. You justified the delay. Yeah, a lot of people contributed to that. Yeah, a lot of people could have helped you, could have warned you, could have done better by you, but you were still the one. And you were wrong. And the habits that got you here today are actually still a part of you. And you don't know how to fix it. And you don't know how to be different. You think of yourself as somebody in control of your life. But how do you change? And is it too late? And is that project too big and too complicated? How do I've gotten myself into a bad situation and I don't even know how to stop. I don't know how to stop keeping myself here. That's the weight that you're dealing with. And now your brain is doing something really dangerous. It's trying to rebuild the old narrative with new material. It's still chasing redemption. This redemption narrative. You're still chasing coherence, right? You're still chasing that feeling that none of this was wasted, right? All of this was for a purpose, right? None of this was wasted, but it was wasted. That doesn't make your life worthless, but it does make some possibilities dead. And the work now, let's shift this conversation now. The work now is not to find the bright side of your past. The work is to look at that part that collapsed and not lie about it. Okay? Here are the emotional mechanics of moving forward in a positive way. Okay? What you're experiencing now is not indecision. It's not an inability to understand what happened or why. You know what happened. What you're experiencing now is grief. The specific grief of irreversibility. And this is not a story that you can fix through discipline. This is not an experience that you can change through your mindset or through positive framing or through giving yourself a better goal. This is what happens when you come into clarity too late to use it in a way that you were planning to. Because here's the truth. Through your life, you actually have gotten smarter and braver and sharper. That's how you had this realization. Because you matured and improved and achieved insight and enlightenment. You're like, well, it would have been nice to have enlightenment when I was 18. Yeah, it would have been nice. But the context that required those traits that you just developed, the context that really could have used those traits is gone. And now every bit of effort feels like kind of an echo. This is not a depression. It's a reasonable response to a structure that broke. So, what's the philosophical frame here? Our philosophical frame is that incomplete lives are still real lives. When people face this kind of loss, when you face this kind of loss, they often try to hold on to their old model of a meaningful life and just compress it, right? So they say things like, well, I'll have a family, but I'll have a late family. I'll just like super accelerate my career. Well, I'm going to save every single penny that I earn, and I'm going to eat beans and rice and live in a tent and max out my salary savings and all this. Okay, I'll just catch up with intensity. And there's something to be said for all that, right? That's the Gary V, you're 82 years old, you're still a baby strategy. And again, I think there's always a place for that line of thinking. But that move is not strategy. That's denial. and their attempts to resuscitate a version of your life that's already gone. And so there's a philosopher named Susan Wolf, and she has a paper, Meaning in Life and Why It Matters. And Wolf argues that meaningful lives aren't defined by how they start or whether they check certain boxes. What matters is whether your actions are actively engaged with something you see as worthwhile. Something that retains meaning even when it no longer offers narrative prestige. So the task then isn't to compress your dream into what time is left. The task is to build a new pattern of meaningful engagement that doesn't rely on redemption or approval. Because you're not building the life you were aiming for previously. You're building what's left. The life you're building is the life that is left. And if you don't re-anchor your definition of meaning to the future rather than the past, you'll spend the rest of your time chasing the ghost of what should have been. And you don't want to do that. If you spend the rest of your life, the rest of your future, chasing the ghost of what you hoped for in the past, then you'll waste your future as much as you wasted your past. So how do you think about this from here? Here's a couple tactical steps, because there's no actual system for solving this. There's no time machine. What you really want, what you really hope for is a time machine, and I understand that. I would like a time machine. I think most people would, but you really want one. And I get that. But there's a way of thinking that keeps you from breaking further and can reorient you and reground you and help you to experience each day now as an equally meaningful journey of possibility as when you were younger. So here's a few steps, really five steps. These are arbitrary, Paul, really 5 steps? These are the 5 eternal steps of dealing with the regretful life? No, I just threw these together. But here's number 1. Stop imagining what your life would have been like if you started earlier. Give up the if onlys. If only, stop. You have to stop. You will drive yourself crazy. If only is a recipe for insanity. That version of you is a fantasy, not just emotionally, but structurally. You were not ready. You were not ready. That wasn't you. You couldn't have done it because you didn't do it. You didn't know what mattered yet. That's not an excuse. It's a fact. Stop spending any attention on that. It eats everything. It will consume you. If you want to survive psychologically, you have to stop. You have to, every time you think, if only, you have to stop. You have to say, I cannot emotionally afford to think, if only. Number 2, separate the goal from the timeline. So some things are gone. Others are just late. Okay, this is the serenity prayer. Right? So where you accept the things you can't change and you have the courage to change the things that you can. Right? So some things are gone, others are late. What's gone, what's late? Clarify that. Okay? Learn the difference. Don't generalize. Get specific about which dreams need to be buried, and then you can work on practicing acceptance about those things, and which can be rebuilt on a longer arc with different stakes. So stop imagining what your life would have been if you started earlier. Separate the goal from the timeline. Number 3, design meaning without spectacle. So the life you wanted may have included recognition or admiration or clear benchmarks of success. Let that version go and ask, what is still worthwhile to me to build? So this is the difference between building a life that is given meaning by spectacle and building a life that is given meaning by my intrinsic value system. Right? You want to ask, what is still worthwhile to build? Even if nobody gives me any applause. That's the test. Number 4, expect smaller returns. So this is not pessimism. It's just calibration. You don't need to prove that your life matters. You need to move inside the life that you still have. Right. This is the same thing as when you're 7 years old and you think you're going to be an astronaut or the president, and then you're 18 and you're thinking, I have different options now. Maybe I'll be a famous musician or a YouTuber or something. And then you're like 23 and you're like, man, I think I'm going to be a great business process analyst at maybe a great enterprise company, right? And then you like your dreams get closer and closer to reality, right? And you calibrate over time. So this isn't some great tragedy. It's just a continuation of that calibration that you've been experiencing throughout your entire life. And some of what you built may be modest compared to what you thought you would build, but this isn't even grief per se. It's just maturation. So again, some of what you build may be comparatively or relatively modest or unremarkable or incomplete, but that doesn't make it hollow. It's about finding things that spark that brings you alive and investing in your life and your energy and your talents and your attention into that, because that still is going to be worth it. And then number 5, anchor to the present without apology. So here's where you narrow your point of view to the now and say, I can't obsess about the future. I can't future trip. So you're not here to defend your slowness. You don't have to make apologies for how slow you got here, because you probably have this script where people are like, why are you here in life? And you're kind of always self-conscious of this and assuming this. And when you explain your life, you're kind of like justifying where you are to people when they're not even asking, right? Like, because you're used to clarity, right? So start with what's small and start with what's still available to you, and build without comparing to other people. If you compare to other people, you will go crazy before you have a chance to actually do anything with the rest of your life. You can't compare. You got to let go. That's point number 6. I said I have 5 points, but I'm going to still go. I'm going to number 6. Don't compare yourself. Stop comparing yourself to other people. You will go crazy. It will drive you crazy. Wow. Look at that, guys. House, life, retirement, family, job, career, health, blah, 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 blah. You know what, man? That's rough. That's a reminder of what you could have had, because what's comparison? It's another version of if only. I said if only was going to drive you crazy, right? When you look at somebody else and you think, man, you feel that envy or jealousy, that's like a if only. I could have been that, right? You can't think that way. You can't think that. You have to just focus on yourself. You have to let that go. A big part of surviving this experience is learning the emotional skill of letting go. Let it go. What does let it go mean? It's a version, it's a metaphor for acceptance. I accept this. I accept that person is who they are with their opportunities and story, and I am who I am with my opportunities and story. I cannot change that. I cannot will anything to be different. I can will change within my own life, and I can do it with intelligence and strategy, and I can and willpower. But I can't change the past. And that's, I think, maybe the 7th point that I want to bring up is the self-pity and the blame, the rumination. And I know I've mentioned this already, but that you have to also stop ruminating. And you have to narrow your focus to the now and not think about the past. And you've got to look at those tasks that scare you most. I remember, I kind of almost hesitate to share the details about my own life, but it's like, I remember there were mornings when I first started really engaging this in my life and changing how I relate to these things in my life. What it took was me waking up every day, 4 hours before work, sitting down at my computer and doing 3 hours of work that I did not want to do, of piecing everything together and fixing things. And all these tasks were things that I felt like, oh, I do not want to do this. I do not want to do this. I would rather walk outside and just get clipped by a car. This is not, I don't want to do this task, right? This feels like facing up to too much of reality. this feels like too emotionally difficult, because what I had to do is I had to excavate my entire history and go through my entire history with a fine-tooth comb and create documentation. And it was just like, ugh, it was rough, man. It was rough. But facing up, nothing in my life ever has ever been so rewarding as doing that, because it gave me the skill to show up and do hard work. And I've never in my life actually ever benefited materially or emotionally more from the result of doing that, of facing up and saying, you know what, and that was the moment I flipped from ruminating and being resentful, ruminating on my resentments towards other people, to showing up and acting and taking one small bite at a time, chipping away at a mountain of bullshit that had accumulated due to my own neglect throughout my entire life. And that was rough. But I'll tell you what, it was so rewarding. And I know this is anecdotal, but when you flip from resentment to action, this is when things actually start to improve, and you start to actually see the light that there is possibility for happiness and meaning and purpose now. And you can begin to, again, let go of this attachment to your vision of a version of you that is from your past, and you can stop chasing that ghost. So, to wrap all this up, you again, if you need to feel like you want to hold on to your vision of the past and not let go and keep going, and you're needing that motivation, dig into that Gary Vee mindset. You're 82 and you're still a baby. Again, I think that's good. It's a good mindset. But if that's all you do, and that's the only way you engage, and that's the only cognitive strategy you employ, you may be risky. There's a risk of being delusional, right? Because on the other hand, you miss the window for one kind of life. And that's not something you recover from. That's something you incorporate into your new story. You don't need a replacement narrative. You need to stop measuring this life that you actually have in reality against the one that didn't happen. And there are still things worth building, not for redemption, not for closure, just because they're worth doing before you die. Life can still be meaningful. And that's enough to begin. It's enough to start. So start today.